All right, so AIM 10.1, this lesson is really just trying to take a look at, in general, just kind of wide angle lens style, like what is the difference between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, just in general. So we're not going to really focus in on anything specific, but we're going to talk some big major like thematic differences between the time period known as the Renaissance and the time period that came before it, the Middle Ages. So here we go. All right, I'll give you a second. So, in order to begin with the Renaissance, we're just going to kind of review real quick in one slide the end of the Middle Ages. And it's really attributable to a lot of things, but these are kind of the big three. First, gunpowder. If knights on horseback training their whole life to perfect and hone their craft become obsolete really, really quickly, that's kind of the end of feudalism, because we talked about class interdependence and the idea that in the feudal system, each class is responsible for something, for the people above them and the people below them, right? So if they are kind of rendered useless through the introduction of gunpowder, that kind of has those implications of class interdependence, and the system kind of fractures. So that's definitely part of it too. So this is, gunpowder makes knights like not important anymore, essentially. And that's the big part of it. The plague we went over, right, kills a huge number of serfs because of the way they live, right? Well, now there's no one to protect, and there's no one to provide labor for cheap. So this kind of impacts the system also. And then finally the Crusades. So there's a couple things about the Crusades. The Crusades, number one, take all the knights away from Europe, so they remove a class from the feudal system that way. And in addition to that, the Crusades result in increased trade between Europe and Asia. And this, I underlined it here, this increased trade between Europe and Asia is going to be the key to the Renaissance. This is what makes the Renaissance possible, okay? Increased trade means more money, and through the power of the almighty dollar, all things are possible. And a big vocab word that we're going to work with is secularism. So looking at the world from a non-religious viewpoint. That's a big one. All right, I'll give you a second. All right. We know from previous units, especially Roman Empire, that the strategic location for the purposes of controlling trade are an aspect of the geography of the Italian peninsula that lead to great success, right? They built an entire empire on this very fact, right? And that empire eventually collapsed, and we went through the Middle Ages and all that, but the same thing remains. This still remains a strategic location for trade. So with the Crusades, as trade ramps up, all of that starts to happen again. So that incredible wealth that's created by this strategic location with regard to it being able to control trade, that comes into play again. And the Italian peninsula and a lot of port cities really start to generate a lot of revenue again. And this makes individual companies, individual families very, very wealthy. Until this time, no one is really a professional artist. That is not your job. Art is something that people do in their spare time. So it's not like I'm a professional painter. That's not a thing. Okay. It's you work somewhere else, and, you're, a farm worker. And in your meantime, you doodle on parchment. That's what art is. But with this kind of influx of revenue, we get what's called patronage, patrons. These are really, really rich people, like the Medici family, and they're so rich that they can literally pay artists just to create. And this is the beginning of kind of art as a profession. This is the beginning of that. So, wealthy Italians but later on, a lot of other people throughout Europe are going to commission talented artists specifically to create things. Okay, the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo. You know what I mean? That's that was commissioned. So these are people paying for these things to be done. And this word patron that we use, a person who gives financial support to a group, organization, or activity. In this case, we're talking about patrons of the arts. So that's a word that you may see in relation to this topic. So I just want to make sure you're aware of it. All right, last slide. All right, so as we go through the unit here, the Renaissance, there's going to be a couple big themes. One of them is questioning authority. So a lot of the Middle Ages was about the authority and control and leadership of the Catholic Church and their position as kind of the last word on everything. What they say goes. There's going to be a lot of questioning authority. So the traditional groups that have been in power politically, socially, economically for a long time, they're going to come under fire. And that's part of a big theme of this unit. This unit's also going to focus on individuals, especially when we talk about art, literature, music, etc. Individuals and the human condition are really the focus of all of these kind of media, art, literature, etc. Where the stories used to remain entirely around kind of religious themes and big picture stuff. Now stories will be focusing on human beings and what makes them human. What are their flaws? What are their virtues? And how do these flaws and virtues kind of determine the course of events? So a lot of the literature changes in the tone kind of and the way, the focus of the writing. That's a big thing also. And then the church is going to decline in power. That's another big thing, right? That goes with questioning authority. So the church, like we said, used to be the ultimate authority, and that's going to change. People are going to start thinking for themselves, and the power and influence of religion will decline considerably, not disappear, and that's an important kind of distinction to make. But it will, at the very least, decline, and that decline will have impacts for society at large. And that's, another thing that we're going to talk about. So, like I said, today we're really just trying to get a grip on, in general, what are the big major differences between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. And this, these themes here that we're talking about are part of that discussion.